All right. All right. Well, I see a couple more trickling in, but we want to go ahead and get started. This will be recorded. So, we can we'll send this out to the registrants, but we'll go ahead and get going and folks can catch up to us on the recording if need be. So yeah, welcome. Thank you for spending some time with us. We've got a really a great webinar on something that maybe you don't spend a lot of time thinking about, beta success, and we're going to make it really fun. So you guys are in for a treat. This is really a key. Beta testing is a silent hero in product improvement. It really is. We mentioned in our registration, 7 out of 10 companies rely on beta testing to enhance their creations. But surprisingly, 57% of them said that they lack a clear process. So we hope that we can help, kind of demystify that process for you today. Joined with 2 wonderful experts in this field, Todd Blackwire from the 280 group. I'll let him introduce himself in a minute, as well as Luke Freiler from Centercode, and he will introduce himself as well. They're going to guide us through a game of beta success, and that's a little foreshadowing, if you will. So we can discover how beta testing can seriously mitigate some risk, sharpen attention to detail, and bring systematic clarity to your approach. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right. So if we could go back one slide, I do want to let Todd introduce himself, and then you can pass it to Luke, and you can say a few words as well.
Yeah, so I'm Todd Blackwire. That French pronunciation is really challenging.
Yeah, I know.
I'm from North Carolina. The closest close person I saw to me was in DC, right? So that's the closest. Anyone closer than, let's see if someone's closer than DC to me in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Other than
Principal
me.
consultant, really excited to talk about this.
Perfect. Luke.
Sure. So I'm the founder and CEO of Centercode. As you'll quickly learn here, hopefully, we focus on this space exclusively. And this was something that I started at a young age when a product manager came to me with a need. I went looking for a solution and identified a hole in the market in an area to help people. And that sort of birthed this company. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes. So let's talk a little bit about where we're from. So who is the 280 group? Both Todd and myself come from there. I am a product manager here at the 280 group. And we really love to partner with product management teams and help transform product management into outcome-based, you can see outcome over outputs, but we love to transform teams into outcome-based product management teams. So, really getting the outcomes that you're looking for instead of just, putting out items on time or, just to kind of satisfy arbitrary numbers. So that's really what we're here for. Those are our core values below, and we live by those. Absolutely. So definitely be in touch with us if you want to get a little help in that area. All right, so let's go ahead and bump to the next, and we'll hear from Luke.
Yeah, so I represent Centercode. We exist, as I said, in this space to help companies bring products to market as well as mature those products with the help of their customer audiences, or in many cases, their own employees in dog fooding programs. As a company, we basically offer 3 core things. One is the platform that companies use to manage this. Down there is just a small subset of the types of companies that we work with: hardware, software, consumer, enterprise, and basically everything in between. So a platform to run these programs yourself. We offer a managed service to help companies do that when they simply don't have the resources. And that's kind of the minor side of our business compared to the platform, but it is something we've helped many, many companies, and it's become our test kitchen to help learn how to do these processes better. And then finally, we do offer a community of people who are very enthusiastic about technology and eager to help bring products to market and help shape them. And we do make those available. We do sell to many large companies, but we also have a sort of product-led growth offering, which I assume is familiar to many product managers. That's our core audience, is product managers, where you can literally sign up and use our platform for free, throw in a credit card number for a very low price and build a bigger program, and then only mature as you need. So pretty much full scale, anything you need for user testing and building beta testing programs and things along those lines, we can help you with.
Perfect. Thank you, Luke. Yes. So let's go into a couple slides of just housekeeping, and then we'll learn about how to do some beta testing. We've got the experts and the tools here between our experts. So yeah, just a couple, like I said, housekeeping tips. Please do ask questions. We love to see what comes through the chat. There's also a Q&A. You can go ahead and add a question in there. We can either answer it via text or we can answer it live. So we love to get those coming in and answer as they apply to what we're discussing at the moment. So feel free to do that. We love to hear it. All right. And then just a couple quick little shout outs to our LinkedIn page. Definitely follow us. We've got lots of great blogs, great networking opportunities for product management. And we love to share some best practices with you. So check us out there.
All right. And you ready to dive in now? Okay.
I think so. All right. I think we are good to go. Onto the fun. So Todd, I'm gonna pass to you. Go for it.
All right. Thank you. So this is you see here a picture of my son. He is 10 years old. His name is Jack. That face tells you everything you need to know about him. This is a game that he designed. So he created this game. It's a Star Wars game. He's a huge Star Wars fan. He created his first board game, and then we played it as a family. I want to show you what that looked like. This is the experience we had playing this game. So the game is easy. Dice roll, see where your token moves to, land on a spot, do what happens when you get to that spot. So early on, that was simple. We were moving along, rolling the dice. If you land on this +2, then you get to go again, +2 spaces. So that's great. I actually like to use red every time. Sorry, there's a little bit of a lag here. I like to use red because I'm Sith. So I was using the red marker and it landed on a +3. And then Jack loved this dynamic. He loved to send people into something that moved him into something else. So +3, then -1. I end up going backwards, fine. We're going to do this for a while. Playing this game, rolling along, and then we encountered this first bend. And around this first bend, my wife discovered this symbol that looks like an asterisk to me. She landed on this symbol, and we learned that this symbol meant everyone goes backwards. So now we all have to go backwards, which takes us into that spot, and then that takes us into another spot, pushing us backwards further. So he loved this. We did this for like 30 minutes. We were trying to pass this one asterisk. And I finally got out of it. I got past the asterisk. I got past that little symbol, past the -3. I was moving. I was stoked. I had escaped. And then we had this moment. This moment happened. My wife landed on it again, which brought all of us backwards. And when it brought all of us backwards, it brought my son into it, which again brought all of us backwards, which put me on the -3, which brought me backwards, which put me there and moved all of us backwards again. I am Sith, so that tells you about me. I was frustrated. He was frustrated. We played for like 40 minutes at this spot, and then I had to go to something. So I was really annoyed because I'm like, I didn't get to finish the game. And they kept playing. But he was really bummed. But it was a great opportunity because I was able to teach him. I told him at the time when he was getting really disappointed. I said, Jack, what you just did is called beta testing. You made this with pencil. You tried it out. And now you learn there's a critical defect in your board game that you need to fix. So his next iteration looked like this. He erased the -3. That's what the -3 actually looked like with the Stormtrooper. And he moved it over, and that we played again, and all was well. We could get past that point quite smoothly just by making that one change. Anyway, so this is introduction to what we're gonna do. And we're gonna use the game concept as we go through this the whole time. And hopefully you can all avoid your next big beta disaster that my son, critical bug disasters you're going through. So here's our agenda, and we're going to get a survey from you guys. We have a question for you. We'll jump into in just a minute. But this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about things that move you forward in testing, things that move you backward, and then things that move everyone backward. So we're gonna that's gonna be our agenda for today. So we'll start, before we talk about things that move you forward, let's get some feedback from you. Here's our question. Here's our first poll here. What is your experience with beta testing? Just choose one of these.
Yep.
Kate, you just launched a poll.
I did. Yep. We've got some voters, and when I see it start to slow down, I'll go ahead and share the results out so everyone can see it. So I see lots of bars moving on my end. So keep on voting. If you've already voted, feel free to share your favorite Jedi in the chat. Not sure if you'd be Sith or what, but love to hear it. I know my kiddos are they're all into the Mandalorian, you know. All right, it's slowing down. Okay, I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1. All right, let me share. All right. Okay, so it looks like tried it and need help. You're in the right place. That one won over. So for the other ones in here, Todd, do you have any thoughts with the results?
Yeah, I mean, I think Luke, not surprising, right? We're seeing it was recently dropped on me. 9
Yeah.
folks too.
Yeah. So when we developed this poll, that was my ad, because that's about half the companies that come to us as a product manager who just had this thrown on their plate and is told they're responsible for it and don't know what to do with it. So I was happy to see that one. And then, yeah, the tried it, need help is very common, but also even the not my responsibility is really kind of lining up. The reality is most product managers are kind of a reflection of what beta is, represents the product, the company, the customer. But in a more mature organization, they hopefully do have some help and some resources, and they're just a major stakeholder as opposed to the owner.
You know, it's funny when I look at this, it was recently dropped on me. Isn't that the way that most people become product managers, just in general? It's like they get anointed one day, you are now a product manager. I'm like, oh,
Right.
here I am.
I look at it as a compliment. One of my favorite things a product director ever said to me was that it's a product manager's job to be the smartest person in the room. So if you are anointed with that, then hopefully it's a really good signal.
We'll take that. I like that answer. All right. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and let's go ahead into our next slide, into the next section.
Let's talk about things that can move you forward. The first thing we have in here, things that move you forward, is really an attitude more than anything else. It's don't worry about being wrong. Worry that you don't know you're wrong. This is actually a picture of me when I was in a punk band when I was younger. And you can see that I obviously didn't care about being wrong because I had that hairstyle. I wish someone told me that it was wrong. That would have been helpful. But I think this came up too, Luke, in our previous conversation when you were chatting about this, just this idea of you can't be afraid to be wrong. You just have to get out there and want to get that information, get those learnings.
Yeah, that's one of the things one of the first things we say to everyone, because from our perspective, we are the messenger, and it's part of sort of the don't shoot the messenger model. This is an opportunity, typically with a small private audience, often in a very confidential space, to learn everything that you don't want to learn under fire. So take an opportunity to get as much as you can as early as you can, so that when you get to that wider audience, you have the best possible launch or release possible. So yeah, this is all about early learning and making those mistakes in front of a small audience instead of a huge one.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's 2 others that we'll talk about: goals and success metrics, setting goals and defining metrics. The first thing I'll say here is just, if you're not measuring, you've probably heard it. If you're not measuring it, you're not doing it, right? If you have no goal, if you don't set a goal, you're not really accomplishing anything. I'll tell you a quick story. So as a consultant, I have lots of clients, and I go and I assess. I do interviews with multiple people at the company whenever I'm trying to kind of assess their product organization state, maturity state. one of the questions I love asking is, tell me about the last successful release you had, or the last successful launch you had. There are some people, lots of people can give me answers. Sometimes people are honest and they say, I don't know, we release stuff, I have no idea. I love that answer. But more often than not, I get people that tell me about something recent. We did this thing and it was cool and we did this thing. And then where they get really tripped up is when I say, can you qualify that or quantify that? Like, define that. What does success mean? And then they get stuck because they're like, I don't know. We were told to release the blue button, and we built the blue button, and we released the blue button. So we did it. And they get stuck right there because they don't actually have an idea of what they were trying to accomplish to begin with. And that's something that could, moving you forward to Luke's point earlier about like just getting out there and testing earlier in small, testing small before it has big impact. Just by setting a goal, knowing what you want to learn, and then having some way of measuring that learning, you're already taking a huge step forward. Luke, have you ever seen this? I mean, have you seen this?
Yeah, so this is one of the biggest problems in this space is people often look at beta as sort of a jack of all trades. You're getting issues, hopefully that are out in the wild. You're getting ideas and improvements. You're getting praise and things that people love, and just sort of how you measure that, what you do with that is very challenging, and they're something that everybody has kind of done differently. From our perspective, we kind of look at it as three things. You need to understand the health of the test, meaning are we getting the engagement we need? Are we getting the coverage we need? You need to look at the success of the product in the eyes of that audience. And there's a relationship between those two things. You need enough engagement to really understand if those success metrics are measurable and actually there's confidence in them, they're empirical. And then finally, you need to understand the actual impact of the test. If all you did was learn a bunch, but didn't actually do anything with it, you didn't have the bandwidth or whatever to make any changes or actually learn from it, then while there's still some benefits, you can prep support, things like that, it's probably not going to meet a reasonable definition of success to justify your time. So it really does come down to thinking about what are some KPIs that could work in this space that you can not only measure, but then use as benchmarks from one test to the next. And for us, what we would recommend is basically those three. Are people engaged? What do they think about the product? And what did we do with what they learned? And if you can score and turn those into true KPIs, then you have a program you can scale and learn from and improve from.
Something you said there, you implied something. I'm like, oh, I should call that out too. When we're talking about beta testing here, it's not even just products. It could be a feature. It could be a major feature as well. So like when we're saying testing, we're really meaning anything that's a change to your product that's going to be a new behavior, result in some new behavior for your customer.
Yeah, beta has changed a lot in ways that a lot of people haven't spent much time thinking about. The short version is the traditional idea of beta testing, which is sort of a beta phase as part of like an old school waterfall development process, where you put it in customer hands for 6 to 8 weeks and you learn a bunch and then you go make changes. That's not really as relevant anymore. That can be relevant for a new major product launch, but most development now, just statistically, the vast majority is iterative. It's all about agile development and maturing and growing a product over time. So we've kind of moved on from the days of we're going to run a beta test every 2 years, which is why most product managers were so unfamiliar. They'd have to learn it and then they'd forget it by the time they did it again. Now we're in a world of continuous iteration and development, and customers don't think of your products as traditional products. They think of them as services. So you're iterating in response to that, and your testing needs to match that. So most testing isn't this all-encompassing project nowadays. It's we're doing a release this month. We're introducing these three features. We want to regress these 5 things and make sure we didn't break this integration or whatever else. And it's hyper-focused and it's continuous in that manner. So it needs to be quick and rapid, and you need to be able to take action as quickly as possible.
I love that point. On the next slide, I'm going to show you a template that we've designed at 280 Group to help with this. And I'll walk you through an example. But I love that point because that's the only takeaway, is that you're going to use the thing I show you on the next slide multiple times a year, like every month you're using this or every other month you're using this. That alone is huge. Just the idea that this is a constant thing. So here's a template we designed. Kate, Kate is our product manager for this particular thing, actually. And so this template is how to ensure that you're aligned with your stakeholders on here's the goals of our beta. Like, here's the whole reason we're testing. Here's why we're testing. Here's how we're measuring our tests. So I'm going to walk you through some examples. I'm going to use my son's game as an example for this beta test template. But we actually have, if you download the pack after this, we're going to have this leadership pack that has this template in it. If you download it, we have examples in there that are B2B and B2C examples as well. So you can see the B2B examples, and they're much more robust than what I'm sharing right here. But first off, you define the objectives. I'm not going to read these. You can all read them. I just want to call attention to a couple points in these examples that are really important. This first one, gathering feedback and how fun it is. You need to, there's a whole reason you built your product or your feature or your release, right? There's this whole reason, this thing you thought it would do for your customer. That really should be tested. There should be a goal. Like, did we accomplish the thing? For Jack, that would have been fun. Next one here, validate gameplay works as intended. Gameplay works. Bugs, right? We need to identify, is this working effectively enough? Are there major critical things that are holding us back? And this last one, I think people often forget when they're doing this kind of testing. But we also have this assumption. This assumption that there's this message that's going to connect with the people we share it with, right? Like, we're going to tell people, you're going to get faster this, you're going to get stronger that, and more this. This is a great opportunity to test that. And a lot of times I found that in beta testing, there'll be this quote that will come up, and I'm like, oh, like, that's it. Like, they just told me what this does. Like, so there's a great opportunity to get the messaging that you use with the customers. Then I'll show you the next one here. These are assumptions to test. We always have these assumptions that sometimes we forget to get on paper as a product team. My son thought that the game was going to be fast. It turned out it was not. It was not. But you have these things, these assumptions that you're going to have, and you need to get those out there. It's a great opportunity to test them with beta testing. And then I'll show you these check marks and then some success metrics. And Luke, is there anything you want to call out? Please, I'd love to hear it. But these beta check marks, we just put that there as some things you might want to consider. Maybe they apply, maybe they don't to your test. But a great way to get on the same page is, hey, here's the things we got to do. Make sure we have in mind. Then I'll show you success metrics here. So you can read these. These are just examples. I'm going to call out one of my favorites. I'll let Luke speak to anything that he sees here that's important. But one of my favorites here is the very last one. It says bugs, and then it said the measurement tool is observation. I'll tell you one thing about testing that people often forget. When you're testing, a lot of times, if you're just testing in interviews or surveys or face-to-face things, most humans are nice. Most of them aren't Sith Lords. They're actually nice. They tend to be nice people. And a lot of times they won't tell you what you need to hear. Observation is a fantastic way to see things break. It's a great way of seeing where your customers really get hung up.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you're right in that there's a natural inclination for people to be polite, especially when this is often an exclusive opportunity. They know they were sort of picked to be part of a small group to help shape the product. What's really important there, and we'll get to it in a bit in more detail, but is messaging to them how important their candidness is, and how the reality is if they don't share those things because they're trying to be nice, then they're just going to add unnecessary friction to the world that they could have been a player in solving. So that's a big one. Yeah, I love this slide when I see that beta checklist, just because this is my world. I think I could give a 2-hour webinar on every one of those that no one here probably wants to sit through. But they can also be as simple or as sophisticated as you need them to be based on your goals. So I really do enjoy this slide. I think it's well put together.
Yeah, I'll show you a couple last bits we have in these columns. I like using the additional resources. This is my place where I put the links. If I have like persona links or feedback portal here, Centercode project, like this is my link to all that, so everyone can have a central point of that. Who's my contacts? Jack, the product manager. And then these dates, this is something else. Like, I can't tell you how many times when I've actually gone to write out the dates of my beta test plan, when I realize, sometimes I realize I started too late. Sometimes I realize, like, oh, I probably should have already done this. Or I realize I get a reality check on like what things are really going to accomplish. And like, it puts me in a position where I can really start communicating when we're actually going to have the data we need. And so just writing down dates is a huge step forward.
I agree with that, but I will also tell you that the one sort of motto within our company is that the only constant in beta is delay. We have to roll with the
100%.
punches more often than ever, because like many things that product managers deal with, your dependencies are basically everyone else. And you need engineering to give you that build. You need everything in place. So, within our system, it's funny because we go out of our way to make sure that if you change the first date, the other ones are all effectively linked to it. Because otherwise you're going to have to go change 5 dates, 6 dates, 30 times. And we know that first date's going to change. So that's just accept it. There's no getting around it. You have to roll with the punches in this world quite often.
And it's a great point too, that like, this is a communication tool, because you sit with your stakeholders and you're like, why do we have to wait till August 14th for the go, no go? This is why I have to do all these things.
Yep.
Absolutely. So Todd, I have a question for you about the observation measurement tool in the Q&A. Do you have any recommendations for methods that you would suggest to get that data?
I'll tell you one. Okay, first off, I love video. There are ways that you can record users interacting with your platform, especially with software. That's a very simple thing to do. And I love to do that, record my users interacting with my software. And typically what I'm doing, and I'm going to try not to get too detailed on this, but I just tell them, so I used to run video platforms for Tribune Publishing, which include the LA Times, Chicago Tribune, other major publications. And we're going to try this new video player idea that ran multiple videos at once. Anyway, it ran multiple videos at once. And so to test this thing, we put it on a page and we just recorded people with simple direction that just said things like, find the video player, interact with the video player. We didn't even tell them what to do, just interact with it. And then in doing that, we were able to see and hear them say things like, where is it? I can't even see it. Is this the video player? Wait, how do I make it play? How do I pause it? And they're like, and we'd see them struggle to do that. And we'd hear them talking about it. And that gave us all the information we needed to know this player was not working. It was not what we wanted. I hope that helps. Did you have anything to add there that I missed, Luke?
Yeah, so definitely a little outside my core wheelhouse. This is what some companies like user testing focus sort of exclusively on, right? They're all about those videos, which is a component of what we do and kind of integrates nicely into the world. I don't see this as often for bugs. I feel like when people run into bugs, those are easier to find. I think the slight difference here for me would be more on the UX side. Like there's a very kind of famous example in the UX world of when companies do in-home testing as an example, meaning they literally send someone to observe someone using a product in their natural environment, which depending on your product, may or may not make sense. But, one of the most famous examples that comes to mind was treadmills. And for the longest time, treadmills, existed as a thing. It was a home exercise device. And somebody did an in-home test and they realized that every house that they went to, somebody was taking a glass of water because you're obviously, thirsty while working on a treadmill, and they would just put it on the top and it would kind of move around and be weird and whatnot. And they had the seemingly, hindsight's 2020 brilliant idea of, we should have a cup holder on there. And it was actually many years before treadmills got cup holders, which is, again, the most obvious thing in the world. But until you observe and see that person and see the patterns of workarounds that they do, which is very critical there, that's where it really comes to mind of like, okay, we're seeing the things that they don't know to tell us, that they're just instinctively doing or whatnot. Right. So yeah, definitely a part of our world, but there's a lot of platforms out there, dozens, that focus exclusively on turning that into something video. But also I would highly recommend, if you have a physical product like that lives in a home, it's consumer electronics and whatnot, as part of your development process somewhere, those sorts of in-house studies of actually going to their real environments are pretty critical.
100%. Absolutely. So I'm just going to show you an example. I'm not going to go over this one, but this is what the template examples look like. So you can see this is a B2B example, much more robust. maybe closer to your real world if you're in B2B business. So if you download the templates, you get these kind of examples. All right, now let's talk about the things that hold you back. The things that move you backward. We'll start off with, which of these challenges do you have? This is this a checklist one? You can pick more than one.
Yes, let me go ahead and open this poll up if I can find it. There we go. All right. All right. Yes, it is. It is multiple choice, or meaning, I guess I should say multiple selection. But yes, you can click more than one. Which of these challenges do you have?
Click all that apply.
Exactly. Lots of answers. I'm wondering how many folks are clicking all of them. we didn't limit that, but we'll see. It could
No, you
be.
should if you can. I mean, I've definitely had all these problems in my career. And I've had all these problems at once.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Starting to slow a little bit. All right. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and end in 3, 2, 1 and share the results. We've got pretty even marks here. I'm interested if you guys can type in the chat as well. If you were finding testers or getting testers to engage, kind of give us some color behind what is, maybe your industry or something, because I think that's going to depend, or that's going to, your answers might be dependent upon that in a lot of ways, and something that we can maybe have a better discussion on. So any other, information that you want to provide in the chat, we'd love to hear it. But yeah, Luke, I'll pass it to you first as far as reflecting and commenting on these poll answers.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So this list, when we did our dry run of this, I kind of joked that in the early days of our sales processes, we sort of discovered and built out what we felt the appropriate list of challenges was. What I would typically do is ask a prospect ahead of that, what are your challenges? So before we'd show them anything, we'd ask them, what are your challenges? And they would just rally off most of these. And then we'd show the next slide and it would be everything they just said and almost feel like we typed it in real time. So it had this kind of magic moment experience that led to a lot of really fun calls, because the reality is most people struggle with most of these things. There's a few exceptions. If you have a product that is wildly entertaining and sought after, and it's very exclusive to get into, then getting testers to engage is probably not an issue. I remember talking to TiVo in the days where, TiVo was the most magical product in the world, and they were like overwhelmed with feedback. And you can imagine that companies like Peloton and whatnot that just have these rabid audiences, this isn't a challenge for them. But for the majority of companies, it is. Similarly, again, finding testers, if you already have a community available, then it's easy. Finding the right testers is a little bit more tricky. We'll talk about that. Not knowing how to do it, probably the single biggest challenge that leads to the rest of these. Not having the time is probably the thing everyone on this call feels, because it's true of virtually everything that we all do in the modern world. And then the last one, little less common, but everybody kind of feels the need. What they don't necessarily have is the resources or the schedule. And we already kind of touched on that one in a big way, is, because it happens pretty late, the later something happens, the more opportunities there are to try to skip it, to cut it down, to do whatever you want, because you're just kind of at that point where you have no choice. Especially in cases where promises have been made to customers and budgets have already been set, so you can't delay something and so on. So yeah, all of these are great topics, and not a surprise to see that many people had many of them.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think we predicted these when we looked at some of our things that move you backward, the most common things. Prospecting being one, the challenge of finding folks to test, and then, or finding the right people to test. There was one comment I saw that said, my company heavily in healthcare, I worked in ClinTech, so adjacent, relies heavily on a handful of our best companies for feedback rather than thousands of other possible customers. Yeah, I've seen that too, right? It's really, you get this pool that's really easy to consistently pull from. I can tell you this as a side note. If you ever wonder, if you have a population that you're using for testing and you ever wonder, when is it time to cycle people out? my rule of thumb is when they become your friend.
I was gonna say.
As soon as someone has testing my product as my buddy, I mean, we can hang out, but you can't test my product anymore. And
Perfect.
engagement's a big one, is keeping them engaged. Once you bring them in, engaging them in the right way. So let's talk about that on the next slide. I think, Luke, you have a lot of information about this from your perspective and your experience.
Definitely. So yeah, we worked to really narrow this list down, and I was pretty happy with where we came out here. And hopefully you guys can walk away with some actionable insights here. But I would say the first thing that people do run into, and it actually touches on things that are being talked about in chat right now, is simply the wrong number of testers. Is they have too few, too many, and both of those have their own problems. If it's too few, then you're not getting the statistical significance that you need to solve some of your problems. The reality is having too few testers can still be valuable, because a critical bug is a critical bug. A critical security issue is a critical security issue. So it doesn't necessarily take a lot, but it is very useful to have the right amount of people. The answer on the other side here is to really think about your testers the same way you would think about personas for a product, and make sure that you have enough people to represent those personas. The actual answer here to what the right number for you is, which is always the question that follows, is a little more sophisticated. And one thing I will say is, if you search, I think, Centercode test size or something like that, we have a little free tool. You don't have to log in to use it or anything, that'll allow you to pop in a bunch of information about your audience, your product, your process, and so on. And it will give you a sense of what you should be thinking about. It's also built into our tool. When you create a project, it makes those recommendations for you. But if you just want something very, very low touch, that's something made available to you that you can just kind of get an estimate. And again, you don't have to give us any information or anything to get to that. I believe it should be pretty painless. So the right number of testers, we typically don't like tests that have fewer than 20, which sounds very low to a lot of people, but we run a wide variety, and we almost never see value in thousands. Typically, the rule of thumb is that you're going to have fewer in hardware than you are in software. There's a number of reasons for that, but one is simply cost and bandwidth of early production hardware or pre-production hardware units. Hardware products for us, I would say, average somewhere between 30 and 50 testers. Software for us is typically in the 100 to 200 realm. And part of that is because it's just easier and cheaper to get software testers, and you work a little bit more around that.
Can I call attention to another struggle here? You're talking about the wrong number of testers in finding people to test. So I worked in cleantech, like I said, B2B cleantech, highly regulatory, very conservative, and at high stakes and limited market in B2B clinical tech SaaS. So software. I'm just going to keep saying words. Anyway, very, very, very. So I'll say here is the one thing I learned, because this is I think a transition to the next one, recruiting too early. I can see that being a challenge. The challenge that I often had is when I had to find beta testers, I often had to spend a lot of time finding them, because selecting for the right company to be your beta test that aligns with the market and then happens to be willing to take on some risk, and also, by the way, can meet all the regulatory needs that you have for that beta tester. I often had to start months ahead of time for my beta test.
Yep, definitely. Our goal there is to hopefully, and again, just our platform, don't want to shill too much, but our approach to that strategy is to make sure that you have a way for people to sign up over time. So you've got a ready and willing database. And then at any given time, just like a focused CRM, or even directly integrated with your CRM, you can immediately push out, recruitment announcements and get people hyped up to get excited about that thing. I'll get into that excitement on the wrong testers one here in a moment. I have something to say there, but having a ready and willing tester group so that you can get going instantly is immensely valuable to taking out the friction from your side. The next one on this list is another big problem, and it's kind of an obvious one, and it's maybe the easiest of all of these to solve. It's a problem we've seen many companies run into, is they make the wrong assumption about how hard it's going to be to get their testers. They start very early, find their testers too quickly. Those testers have mentally committed at this point in time to start engaging with you. And if you do that a month ahead of time, 2 months ahead of time, you're going to run into every issue in the book, right? They're going to go on vacation, they're going to get disengaged, they're going to get busy at work, and so on. And again, we've seen this hundreds, if not thousands of times, that people want to get a jump on it and start early, but they then run into delay after delay after delay. And all of a sudden, all those things come together and they've lost most of their testers. And that just creates a new delay. So making sure that you can kind of recruit at the right time. And again, it depends on your audience. If they're really, really easy to find, then this is a no-brainer. If they're going to be a little bit more work to find, there's going to be some more messaging involved and some level setting. So that's an important one, and just making sure that you're recruiting at the right time. But the last one I think is by far the most impactful, the most important, and it also solves many problems downstream. And this is something that, again, I'm very passionate about because I think it makes or breaks a beta test. But the reality is, your product is designed to solve a problem. Virtually every product solves a problem. That problem might be entertainment. That problem might be a business problem. It can be virtually anything, but that's what we're building is to go out and address the needs and issues of our audiences. You want people who have that problem. At the end of the day, if I could just boil it down, the people that are experiencing the problem you're solving, the friction that you're removing from their lives, are going to be the ones that are the most passionate about having their fingerprint on that solution. They're the ones that are going to get excited. One of the topics we're not going to go into depth today about, but people often ask many, many questions about incentives in testing and how you incentivize these testers. And I'll give you my potentially controversial view. I don't like incentives at all. I don't think they're necessary. What we found in our studies is the more you incentivize, especially if you advertise your incentivization, the worse testers you're going to get, because you're going to get those people that are out there looking for, a $20 gift card or something, and they're just phoning it in. They don't have the real problem. The reality is, if somebody has the problem you solve and they're passionate about that problem and that product, then they want to be a part of the solution. That's the perfect customer. And the best incentive for them is recognition and a genuine thank you. A product manager reaching out and saying thank you is a hell of a lot better than a gift card or virtually anything else. Is they really, really appreciate the idea of building products is an everyday thing to us. It's mystical to most of the outside world. So when they get to partake in that, when they get to see how the sausage is made, that's exciting. It's exclusive, and they really like it. So you want the testers who are the people that are going to enjoy your product, get the most out of your product. And if you can narrow those in and really understand that, then you're going to learn a lot more. Everything's going to be easier. Engagement's going to be easier. You're going to build evangelists. It's just benefit after benefit after benefit. So making sure that you're finding the right people with the right motivations, that'll solve most of your other problems. It's not easy. There's obviously a lot of ways to get around it, but that is the thing that I would promote almost over everything else.
Great. We'll jump in. Let's talk about engagement. But before we do, I just want to add one thing here. Just remember that oftentimes the people who are beta testing tend to be of a certain ilk. They tend to be early adopters. They tend to be people willing to take on some risk, especially in the B2B environment. So this is a callback to earlier when Luke said continuous. You got to continuously do this. After you've launched your new product, your new feature, continue to test, because as your audience grows, as your customer base grows, you're going to get more pragmatists that test now. You'll get some conservatives who test, and that feedback will be different than the early adopter feedback. So good to just keep getting it.
You definitely hit on it earlier as far as when to get rid of testers. In an ongoing process, I mean, we have customers who've had one beta program for one product line running for, I think we were talking about it yesterday, it was like 8 or 10 years. And they've been going, they've got thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of feedback in that time. And they're constantly filtering in and out people. And they're sort of grouping them and segmenting them in ways so that they know how to consider these testers' feedback versus others. And they know how to weigh the feedback of one group versus another, and so on. That's just how mature it's gotten over that course of time.
Great. I'm going to answer one question here, and then we'll move on. We'll take another. We'll grab another question in a minute. But what is your definition of done? Ken asked. I'll say that definition of done is particular to your test. It's particular to what you're doing. But it goes back to what we talked about earlier with the goals that you're set and the metrics that you're using to measure it. And I'll tell you, as long as I've been in this game, it doesn't seem to matter how many tests I've run. I keep coming up with new metrics because almost every test needs its own metric to know that I've reached success. So yeah, keep that going. I need to kill a pop-up.
I will say that this is one that, funny enough, has been a recent discussion at Centercode. You know, we, as I said, we have our own test group. So we have a test kitchen that we learn a lot from, but we also listen to our customers. And definition of done is a challenge because it is different for everybody. And we're currently talking about how we do a better job of surfacing that information, letting you define explicitly what that is. For us in our system, we have sort of a concept of blockers, and the most obvious version of done would be we resolved all the blockers. That's kind of one way of looking at it. Different companies look at it in completely different ways. Some approach it purely from a quality perspective, and this is effectively an extension of their quality efforts. And their definition of done is that there's no, Sev 1 or Sev 2 bugs, things like that. It really depends on what your goals are in getting this product or this release to market, and it is going to differ from one to the next.
Thanks. And we'll touch on this. I want to make sure, of course, we get to the things that take us all back, move everyone backwards. But one of the things we talked about is engagement. We have this challenge, and if you just can't keep that engagement with your end user, your tester, your beta test will fail. Luke, maybe you can give us some points on this of how we get that engagement.
So these are all great points, and they're all wonderful extensions to the prior slide. They kind of tie one to one in a sense. Expectation setting and messaging is something that many companies really stumble with. Is that you have to be clear and transparent. You want to make these testers feel like they're a part of your team. And again, that bleeds into engagement and getting them enthusiastic, but they need to know what is expected out of them in every regard. And a lot of companies approach beta as a fire and forget mechanism. They basically throw it out there and just expect feedback to magically come. But the reality is you're giving a, by definition, broken product to a group of strangers. And expecting that to manifest itself into something magic is not going to happen on its own. So you need to be clear about what you're looking for. You need to drive them the right amount. Now, where it gets a little tricky is you don't want to overdrive them. You don't want to tell them, this isn't QA test cases, right? It's not do these 5 things and tell me if they worked. That is often a part of many tests, but that's not really the broad goal. The broad goal is to make sure the entire experience is what you need it to be in all those regards. So just making sure that all of that messaging is clear. And again, I've already alluded to it, but content marketing is an enormous part of Centercode's go-to-market strategy, which means, and it seems very similar for 280, based on what I've learned so far, we produce an enormous amount of free content for you to go learn from. Every one of these topics are covered either on significant pages on our website or downloadable content. But regardless, there's nothing we're going to talk about here that we don't have blog posts and all sorts of things. So please dig in if what I'm saying isn't conclusive enough. There's plenty of resources for you there. And again, I think 280 has a lot of their own too. The next one is inconsistent follow-up. Right. And this is very similar to what I said a moment ago, in that that initial expectation setting is one thing. But if you go that fire and forget route and you don't follow up, you don't continue to keep them in the loop, make them feel like they're a part of your team and that they're valuable to you, then they will disappear. They'll kick the tires, they'll get burnt out, they'll go away. One of them we didn't list on here, but I will say it out loud, it's semi-related, is we didn't talk about when the right time to go to beta is. That's another way to absolutely destroy your engagement. And it should probably be a -4 on here. If you go to beta too early and you give a very broken product, especially without expectations to testers, they're going to get frustrated, annoyed, and burn out immediately. And it may take you a little while to realize why. Because in many cases, if it's that bad, they're too stressed to even bother giving you the feedback. They just bounce. That's the easiest thing for them to do. So the last one then ties into those a little bit too, in that we think of everything as anything that introduces friction is going to inhibit success. And this is obviously not just for beta, it's for everything. Humans by nature have some degree of laziness in them, and it's different for all of us. And anything that puts up a roadblock is an opportunity for us to go focus on something else, to go do something else. So part of the reason we were so passionate about building a great tool set is because what we found is that the way most companies were solving this prior to our tools was by using 5 or 7 different tools to get this done. They're using a survey tool, they're using a forum tool, they're sending out emails that lead to feedback that goes into a spreadsheet that probably has to be copy and pasted somewhere else. And friction on both sides, internally with internal engagement from your own team and stakeholders, and equally important, the testers, just gets hampered. And every one of these things is about clearing a path. It's about making sure that these testers can give you feedback as easily as possible, but in a form that you can actually take action on, right? If they just give you feedback in a spreadsheet that you're never going to have the time to work on, then that's a problem. If they don't give you feedback at all, that's actually the same problem. At the end, you have nothing. So making sure that you're just reducing friction at every point, tools being one of the ways to do that, is critical to getting engagement from your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that all of you have heard this as we're giving these pointers. You're probably thinking, all this is awesome, but I don't have time. Like we say, don't have time to play this game. We need the testing game. They're like, yeah, don't do it. I just don't have time. And I'll tell you what this comes down to. So I've learned this. This is consistently my answer in regards to time. Because to what Luke said before, this is a constant product manager problem. We could say this with everything. I don't have time to do research. I don't have time to research my market. I don't have time to understand competitors. I don't have time to build out a strategic roadmap. We could do that over and over and over again. So my pointer here, just before we move on and what moves everyone back, the thing that gives you time, it creates time. There's two things. One is when you get the buy-in for the necessity of something. So when you're able to sell the value of something and you get that buy-in of this is important and it provides value. The second thing is when you lead, give yourself lead time. One of the biggest mistakes we make is, and you might be listening to this right now and going, oh, cool, I want to beta test this feature that we're going to release next week. That's probably not the one to pick. That's too late. We let that one go. Look 3 months from now and think of something you're releasing then, or 6 months from now, and start thinking about how you can plan beta test for that. So you can start small, grab that template, start writing some goals, slowly move it forward so that, you know, in the next few months, you're ready for that big beta test instead of trying to jump in right now, dive in right now. That will get you ahead. That will create some time for you. All right, let's talk. Do we want to take a question? Maybe we'll take one question before we jump into the next section.
Yeah, I was actually in the process of typing an answer until I realized it would probably be more fun to answer these live. So I erased my answer.
And we've got like 5 minutes, so let's be quick.
Yeah,
All right, we'll answer
the first
that one question at the top then, and then we can.
Yeah, the first
Perfect.
one on there. How do you recruit beta testers in a B2B environment, afraid to be unprofessional to existing customers? So I'll go back to something I already said. It's about the messaging. It's about making them feel like they're going to have a hand in shaping the product that solves their problem. Earlier, when I talked about every product solves a problem, you have to connect some dots to make that make sense if you're making a video game. They don't really have a problem other than they're bored. But in the B2B environment, I can say quite literally every product exists to solve a problem. So you need to focus in on that problem. That's my unbiased answer. Now, momentarily, I'll give you my biased answer is do everything you can to make it look like an official program. And again, our platform is all about that. It's about making sure that it's branded and feels like something they're joining, and it feels exclusive, and that they're part of a VIP or an advisory board almost. You can sort of pitch it that way. And now all of a sudden it's a value add. They're getting closer to the company, and these guys are going to become evangelists. They're going to sell for you within their firm or at other colleagues. So lots of benefit to be had there. I can hold off on the other questions and see how we are for time, but
we can get to those. We'll get to those if we have time. We'll move forward.
Okay.
But then Nick, let me just give you 3 bullets there. So the first one that Luke shared, right? There's a reason why you're doing this. There's a whole reason, a problem it solves. Make that clear. Bullet number 2 has worked for me. Use people that have relationships. Don't cold call them. You have at a company that has B2B customers, you have account executives, you have customer success people. Use them, go through them. And the last point is that means you have to sell this internally. Those are your stakeholders. Those people have to believe in you and believe in the value of doing it.
And this can strengthen relationships. There's a lot of great internal messaging to tell those account managers how these are going to be customers for life once they're part of the inner circle.
Absolutely. And I think it's actually a good transition of this. Things that move everyone backward. By the way, I learned that this little asterisk sign was actually the imperial symbol. That's what he was drawing in those spaces. So these are the things that move everyone backward. And we touched on a lot of these in talking about some friction. communication. And I think that's a good lead into what you just said, Luke, is this lack of communication. When people internally don't know why you're doing this, the value of it, what you're testing in the first place, what you're going to do with that information, that's when it becomes really hard to get people to help you. That's when it becomes really challenging to get the time and space to do this kind of testing. And I remember, Luke, you had a point about too much friction. Would you mind jumping in on that? And then
yeah, definitely. This is something that just sort of, as a CEO of a company, I think about in virtually every respect. It was a very successful board member of mine kind of pitched this to me, and I've never forgot it. But you really should be doing everything you can at every point to remove any sort of friction, both internally and externally. You know, I actually think a lot of companies spend more time thinking about how to make it easier for their testers, when making it easier for their stakeholders and their coworkers is equally, if not more, important. The testers, as I said, if you identify them right, they want to be involved. They're very enthusiastic. Your coworkers look at this as another thing in their day. And potentially, and this is one of the interesting tricks of beta, if you're a product manager running beta, what you're doing is discovering a lot of things that arguably other people could or should have found. And therefore, they might be a little concerned about that. So in a sense, it's your air cover because you care about those things. Your success is on the line. So doing everything you can to make it easy for them to adopt that information, to work it out, to do it in a positive way. And again, just removing all that friction is very, very valuable to getting this adopted by a wide group.
I love that. So I'm going to show you two things that will help you here, and then we want to give you some cool stuff. So we got to move quickly to give you the cool stuff before you go. This helps you if you're having trouble with that communication or reducing that you want to reduce that internal friction. This is a tool that comes in the toolkit. You can have this. It's how to keep track of your stakeholders and knowing how to chart and keep them engaged and keep them informed. We also have this tool. All of this assumes, I've put in there a little note there that, there's no decision-making process. This all assumes you're going to make a decision. Why are you doing all this testing if you're not going to decide anything with it? Well, we have this tool in here to help you enable your internal teams with this go-to-market information that tells you once you find out that you're ready for beta. So it's all part of the pack. I'm going to answer this last question here, and we'll share a couple cool things with you. What does beta success look like? It's not about it's not about proving that you were right. Beta success means you got quantifiable learning. You got information and data that helps you make a decision. That decision may be to continue going. It may be to pause and pivot. That decision may mean to kill it all together and leave it. Regardless of what the decision is, success is that you have the right data. So just be proud that you have the information you need and you can defend it. All right, Kate, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Let me add one line to that, if you don't mind. I know we're short on time, but I'll simplify it for you even further. I agree with absolutely everything Todd has said, but beta success is when you can sleep at night. And that's a statement we use a lot here. Is there's a lot of anxiety to this role. As a product manager, you're reliant on a lot of other people that you don't control doing their jobs. Beta gives you full visibility of that entire experience. And when you see that beta happen, you see that people are liking it, or you identify the things you didn't know, going back to one of Todd's earlier points, then you can sleep at night. And that's just a win. So that's the goal, is you have the confidence that this launch is going to go well and you don't die of a heart attack at 45.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Okay, so we are going to drop in some free resources. We do have a special offer here. So we've got a go-to-market pack. So all of those templates that Todd shared, they're free. We're giving them to you. So yeah, go ahead and click on that in the chat, and you can get those yourself. Feel free to reach out to us on how to fill them out. And yeah, we will definitely be sending out the recording as well. All right, we want to move to the next one.
So
Luke, you want to speak to this?
yeah, I'll speak to this one real quickly.
Yeah.
So as I said, we have an enormous amount of resources. Just go to the resources section on centercode.com. But something my product team did throw together today is a free month of what we call our Delta edition of our product. So our free edition is our beta edition. It's typically for running beta tests, and it's something you can sign up and be using within a few minutes, get the hang of it, and hopefully have a great time. Our Delta edition is meant for a prescriptive path to help a product manager succeed. It's a deep feature set, deeper than we have to talk about today, but you can adopt it very quickly because it's all about automation. And if you type in the promo code 280 group, you'll get a month of that free. Try it out. If you don't like it, don't use it. If you do like it, we'd love to talk to you and help your program grow. When you talk to someone at my company, you're going to talk to a product manager. So the nice thing is you're not dealing with the traditional sales role. We have product managers who know this like the back of their hand, who can really help you out. So always happy to have that conversation. And I did mention this to the 280 group ahead of time, who's been a wonderful team to work with, by the way. My email is luke@centercode.com, and I have no issue with anyone here just shooting me a message, asking me questions. If there's anything I can do to help with this, help you with getting a sense of how adoption works, buy-in, let me know. I'd be happy to help. And if I can't, I've got plenty of people on my team who can. So luke@centercode.com, don't hesitate to connect or reach out. I love talking to people in this space.
Love it. Thank you, Luke. And I believe this is our last little update here. We do have 2 classes upcoming, and you'll see a familiar face on there with Todd. So definitely check these out. We've got a couple live online courses. They're exceptional courses. They will help you do all of these things and more. So definitely, snag a spot in there. But yeah, thank you. I see some folks dropping. I just want to thank you so much. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Todd. This has been hugely helpful, and we will be sending out the recording. I hope you all enjoyed. Thanks all.
If you can hang out for 1 minute, let's give Julie an answer to her question.
Oh, let's do it.
Just
Yeah,
1
go
minute,
for
we'll
it.
answer a question.
If anyone
Everyone can
wants to
drop
hang
if they need to.
Sorry, which question?
Julie asked, she'd like some pointers for in-app feature level beta testing for B2B
Cool.
and B2C.
Cool.
And
Yes.
I think this is right down your
Yeah.
alley.
So I'll talk to 2 sides of this. We don't do the actual integration into your app directly. There is APIs, and you can do a lot of that. But the place I would look for something like that is companies like Launch Darkly that exist exclusively to help your engineering team implement feature flags. It's for far more than beta. It's just for general product management and whatnot. It's a beautiful, very, very prolific tool. We are actually working with them to try to build a closer partnership. We can integrate with them, but we want to make it much smoother. That's a great tool, and they have competitors, but frankly, they're the killer leader. On our side, we do approach our entire methodology for this type of testing, for understanding that you're focusing your testing efforts on specific features and whatnot, often with a limited audience. So when you bring someone in and they are feature flagged to use these 2 new things, these 5 new things, they can then specifically be bound to just test and provide feedback, or be driven to test those specific things.
Right. Thanks, Luke. Hope that helps, Julie.
Perfect. Yeah.
And thank you
Thank
everyone
you.
for everyone stuck around.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for the
love it.
time. Had a blast. Thank you, Todd. You killed it. Kate, everyone's great. Love you guys.
Thank you, Luke.
Thanks, Luke. Thanks, everyone. Y'all have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Bye.
Bye.